Good morning, everyone. I welcome you to the Thursday, June 5th, 2025 City of Tumwater Public Works Committee meeting. With us today, we have Council Member Althauser, Council Member Jefferson, and myself, Council Member Swarthout. First action item we have is approval of the minutes from the May 8th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So move.
I'll second the motion.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, so scooting right along, we'll go on to our first item on the agenda. I guess I should have asked first if we had any changes. No one said it. We're good.
No,
We're good. I'm saying, Dan, I usually hear from you ahead of time. Sorry. So, sorry to make you unmask. So. All right, now we'll move on to our first ordinance of the day, renewing the Puget Sound Energy franchise agreement. Take it away.
Good morning.
Good morning, Jennifer.
So I'm Jennifer Radcliffe, GIS Program Manager with the city, and I'm here to present the ordinance number 2025-002, which is renewing the Puget Sound Energy franchise agreement. So the franchise agreement basically lets Puget Sound Energy operate in our right-of-way, their equipment, maintaining their equipment to provide electrical service and gas, just energy services to residents and businesses and people in the city. So the franchise agreement that we have currently is effective for 10 years with the option to renew for 2 5-year terms upon written request. We're at the end of that first 10-year period. The PSC has provided written notice that they would like to extend for 5 years. So we're bringing this to council to extend it for 5 more years. And I would like to request that the committee place the ordinance on the July 1st, 2025 City Council consideration calendar for the first reading.
I have a question.
Okay.
So the 10 years is up. We're going to get another 5 years, and then in 5 years we're going to get another term. So what happens after that next 5 years? Do we get another 10-year term?
Yes, I believe we do another a new agreement at that point. So
okay, so this is like a contract, and then we're going to extend the contract 5 years, extend it another contract 5 years, and then we're going to have a new contract after that 5 years is up. Is that what it is?
That's my understanding of it. I don't know if anyone
okay
to chime in.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, and looking at, I was wondering if anything had changed on the ordinance. It doesn't, there's nothing on there that looks like it was lined out or anything. So it looks like it's the basic, just updated information from the one that we held before, is if I'm correct on that one.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm not turning on my camera because I'm currently traveling, but yes, that's the same. It's the same provisions. I believe that there was, I don't know the right way of saying it, but just some small minor legal details that changed, but in effect, it's no change.
Okay. All right. Okay, well, this seems pretty straightforward. Do we have any other questions for Jennifer on this? No? Okay, all right. So we do have a recommended action before us to place ordinance number 2025-002, renewing the Puget Sound Energy franchise agreement on the July 1, 2025 City Council consideration calendar for first reading.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, second?
And I second.
Okay. All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Super. All right. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. All right. Moving on to our next item on the agenda, we have the supplemental agreement number 2 for Tierra right-of-way for X Street roundabout projects. Who do we get to see?
Hello. Hey, you get to see
Good
me.
morning.
I am Joe Norman. I'm an engineer in the Transportation and Engineering Department, here to discuss the department's need for a supplemental agreement with Tierra Right-of-Way Services and for their work on the X Street Roundabout project. Just a quick background on the project. We have designed a new roundabout at the intersection of X Street and Capitol Boulevard. This is a federally funded project. Because of the size and shape of the roundabout, we will be needing additional right-of-way, which is where right-of-way, our Tierra right-of-way services comes in. They are helping us get through that federally funded or federally required mandates. Sorry. So the supplemental agreement, it will increase the maximum amount payable from $150,000 to $184,220. It will also adjust their billing rates to 2025 rates. And the benefit to the city is that they will be providing a higher level of service than originally contracted and expected from them. The original agreement was signed in 2023, back when we had a deputy director to assist in the workload for those upper level management. So the funds are currently covered under the local agency agreement, where we have $200,000 for consultant services that we got back in July of 2020. That's all I have. You have any questions?
All right. Calendar. Do we have questions for Joseph? No? Okay.
I do.
Okay. Angela.
Yes, since I'm new to the team, so just briefly, right of way. So
Mhm.
are they standing there with their, signs? Are they the ones who tell us to stop when there's construction going on? So what is the right of way? Just a quick rundown.
Yeah, so we need additional property essentially in
Mhm.
order to build the roundabout. And so the geometry of the roundabout extends into private property. We need to purchase additional property for this from those private entities in order to extend the city's actual footprint, so that
Okay, so it's like, you need more land from a private,
yes.
from a private owner, and then so now, okay, I got it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
And this is the right of way that we've been working on this for a while as far as working with different property owners. Is that
Yes.
the one down at X Street?
Yes.
Okay. I think we've been briefed on that one, where we've had an update on trying to secure the right of way there, your work on that. All right, so this one's again pretty straightforward. We do have a recommended action. We don't have any other questions for Joseph, then we'll go ahead. We've got a recommended action to place the supplemental agreement number 2 for the Tierra right-of-way services for the X Street roundabout project on the June 17th, 2025 City Council consent calendar, with a recommendation to approve and authorize the mayor to sign.
So move.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Thanks, Joseph, for your presentation. And we're moving along here to our next item on the agenda will be, sorry, going back to the agenda. We have the real estate contract with Lot for purchase of Deschutes Valley properties. And I believe we'll be hearing from Dan.
Good morning, Council. And I came up quick, so I appreciate my colleagues giving me plenty of time to go over this project with you this morning. Let's see here. Let's share my screen. I'm going to have this presentation for you. Let's see, we'll do this, and then we'll say share, and then we'll actually get it going. Once I can find the other little button that I need. There it is. Okay, hopefully you're seeing the presentation as well. So yes, this morning we're going to talk about the Deschutes Valley property acquisition. These are the properties that are also known as the lot properties down the valley, the former properties that were owned by, or the properties that were owned by the former brewery in support of their services. Goals for today, you've seen this project before in front of you, but really today we want to just kind of go back over briefly how we got here to where we're at today. What's in the agreement that was negotiated with Lot, and where do we go from here, and what does that look like? The request that we have in your packet originally requested that we place the real estate contract on the June 17th consent calendar for City Council. You're still welcome to put it on a consent calendar. However, my recommendation is probably going to be for consideration because of the nature of this acquisition and the relationship with Lot. So again, how did we get here? Back in 2011, the Lot Clean Water Alliance had acquired these 3 parcels you see on the right hand of your screen for reclaimed water production. At that time, their capital planning was calling for satellite plants located in each one of the jurisdictions. You know that there's the reclaimed water production facility over in Hawks Prairie, or the mitigation ponds over there, and then the treatment facility in Lacey. This was scheduled to be the city of Tumwaters. However, some of their plant requirement, plant updates downtown at the Butt Inlet plant, really kind of put that planning and that construction need off in time. And when they redid their capital planning in 2023, given the capacity upgrades that they had done at their downtown plant, they realized and that they no longer really needed the treatment plant, a satellite treatment plant up here, that they could produce that reclaimed water at the Butt Inlet plant and deliver it to the city through the transmission mains that they have today, where we do have reclaimed water to the golf course, and through that transmission main, that is how the city receives that water. So back in 2023, Lot declared these properties surplus after approaching the city and asked the city if the city would be interested in acquiring these properties. We signed a memorandum of understanding that provided a pathway and a timeline for the city to potentially acquire these properties. The first step of which was a feasibility study that the city would undertake to kind of determine whether or not these properties had a good public value for us, and what those needs could be that could be met for public value. So we completed that in 2024 with the help of SCJ Alliance. We found that these properties really can serve a number of different goals. You see in the bottom of your screen here, economic development that's consistent with the comprehensive plan, the Brewery District Plan, transportation needs, mostly thinking of the East Street connection across the valley floor there to Cleveland Avenue, habitat enhancement along the Deschutes River, the riparian corridor of the Deschutes River, parks and rec for trails, rafting, outdoor recreation. So various needs could be supported, and then not the least of which was parking for events, of which we currently use those properties through agreement with Lot to have parking down there for 4th of July, Brewfest, and other events that we conduct. So once the feasibility process was done, we provided notice to Lot saying that there was public value, and we were interested in moving forward with the process outlined in the MOU, which really brought us to a pathway of developing a purchase and sale agreement. Once we could kind of have a better understanding, the feasibility study provided us some better understanding. We also looked at completing a new phase 1 with Pioneer Technologies. The reason for a new phase 1, because the last one was conducted, I want to say, in 2011 or 2017, somewhere in there. There was some previous phase 1 work that had been done, but we wanted to update that, refresh that, also in the context of the work that Lot had done down there. We did that as well in 2024. We completed that in November. And since then, we've been working with internal staff and Lot staff to develop a purchase and sale agreement that addresses and considers the liabilities and the assets of the property down there. So again, 3 parcels, about 45 acres. It had a appraised value of $3.9 million. It's actually less than what Lot had paid for it back in 2011. It's zoned light industrial. We looked at a number of land uses. What are land uses down there? What are the physical and environmental characteristics, i.e. the phase 1, what did that reveal to us in terms of what would be the actual purchase price that we would negotiate with Lot for the acquisition of these properties. Looked at technical and constructability issues. As you know, there's a floodplain down there, and so there's not a whole lot of market demand that can resist that type of impact to a property. Financial viability, regulatory considerations, trying to understand, what are some of the impacts, how are these elements going to affect the purchase price, of the property. You can see here on the right-hand side of your screen, I have some check marks and some X's. These are the X's represent the liabilities. So when as I mentioned, the zoned or the appraised value came in less than what Lot had paid for it when they had acquired it, partly because there of some of the environmental challenges down there, the flooding, as well as some of the liabilities that exist down there. These buildings were considered as part of the value and did increase the value, so to speak, of developed buildings on the site. These over here actually decreased it because of some of their liabilities and challenges for or just basically their buildings that need to be demolished, and so they diminished the value of the property. So the appraised value again came in at $3.9 million for these 3 parcels. Again, looking at how can the city use this, and this is just conceptual drawing. There is no this isn't equal the alignment of the East Street connection, or this is where parking is actually going to be, but it could be. These are areas that could suffice, and so you see in the green in this corridor here, this is the riparian corridor that could be used for the habitat restoration or replacement for the existing asphalt and kind of building a better riparian area. That could have some value to the city from a compensatory mitigation for the various projects that the city works on, whether it's stormwater outfalls or wetland enhancements that relate to takings for other projects that we're working on, other opportunities for invasive species removal, soil amendments in those areas. And also potentially some floodplain storage mitigation challenges there as well. So most of this property is inundated during the high water events. The golden dotted areas kind of represent about 1,500 parking stalls in total for those areas. There was a number of configurations that were considered, including could those 1,500 stalls be completely placed on the east side of the railroad tracks, because this railroad track still remains an obstacle, so to speak, to future development or kind of the wholeness of the property. The agreement that Lot has for traversing over the highway, it extinguishes upon resale, and so there will be some work that will need to be done with the railroad to get a very similar agreement, but it doesn't allow for public traffic over the roadway there. So that's still going to be a constraint for these 3 properties that would have to be considered over time for the city and how we would be looking at that. It does allow for intermittent access, and I think as for one day a year, July 4th, when the railroad is not operating, there can be more access over that. Yes, Councilmember Althofer.
Thanks. That's what I was going to ask about, is if we have, I don't know if it's an easement or what is the correct term of art, but for going over that for the 4th of July, and then also for Brewfest, whether those agreements also expire as a result of this. Does this put, I guess my question is, if we buy this and then those things expire, do we feel comfortable that we'll still be able to get access by the time those events occur?
Well, luckily for this year, we're structuring the purchase and sale agreement to not be in full effect until September 1st. So
okay.
In August and July, we should be still good on operating under Lot's agreement with the railroad there, and then we would begin that negotiation with the railroad, and we would anticipate probably getting a very similar agreement with them. And alternatively, the railroad does have processes that allow for you to hire the railroad to basically come out and provide traffic control. It's fairly expensive and, not something we would want to do on a regular basis, but it would allow for other events to travel over that. And, and I would have to, confirm with Chuck whether or not for events which are smaller events like Brewfest, that you could actually fit all of that parking on the west side of the tracks. Which I believe that they can at this point, especially since we don't have the riparian corridor there. This riparian corridor would diminish parking to some degree on this side, which is why we would also have parking over here. So I mean, thinking about future development, the city is also owns the property on this side for the brewery well field. We own that in conjunction with the city of Olympia, and so as we consider what development looks like there could be options to bring some kind of road down to the base of the the floor here, valley floor here, to allow for traffic to come down.
Yeah, and so like for things like Screen on the Green, we do parking here on the west part, and then also that other parcel. So we're not actually crossing.
Correct.
Like not we. I mean like people's cars, residents who go to Screen on the Green. They're not actually crossing, so that's not an easement issue in the same sense as these big events like 4th of July. Okay.
Correct.
Got it. Thanks.
Yep. So that's kind of what the three major land uses that would provide a good public benefit for the city. So the other thing we want to look at, as I mentioned, we went through, we refreshed the phase 1 environmental assessment for the properties there. When Lot had acquired the property, imagine if all of these little call out flags were in the red, and those were liabilities for Lot. Lot had actually over the last 10, 12 years, have actually done a lot of work down there to mitigate those impacts and reduce those liabilities. And so where you see these greens over here, these still exist. However, we've accounted for those in the contract, whereas white, they've actually done either decommissioning or removal of those liabilities. And so there's, like I said, there's been some substantive work done to reduce the amount of liability the city would be acquiring under this. There's still a couple of structures that we would acquire. As I mentioned, there's the storage warehouse, the hop storage warehouse, and the can warehouse, as I understand it now. They're don't necessarily represent the same security concerns that some of the other property has. From what Lot has shared, that these aren't major targets of vandalism. One of them is currently used by a community group, just for storage of some of their materials and floats, so to speak. And so, those, kind of those ongoing uses, we would be reevaluated. It would be also determined whether or not, how the city would utilize these facilities if we would. On the west side of the tracks, over on this side, where you see the pesticide cabinet, the paint storage shed, alcohol recovery building, those are structures that still exist. However, represent very low environmental concerns, but the city would be moving pretty quickly to remove those structures to reduce the risk even further. As with any industrial land use, I'll call it PSE substations too that exist here. There's still some facilities, as I understand, it's all been inactivated. Regardless, this is Puget Sound Energy exists on that space as an easement, and there is an agreement in place that if those facilities are no longer yet necessary, Puget Sound Energy would be responsible for the removal of those elements. And then a couple of smaller outbuildings, workshop, landscaping shed, very small outbuildings with some debris and garbage in them that would have to be mitigated and resolved by the city. So, ultimately, what do we include in the contract? Those risks, those building risks, were of concern to us to a degree, and looked at, what's the city going to have to undertake in terms of cleanup, mitigation, demolition, for those various facilities, as I mentioned, on the west side of the tracks there, in particular the boiler house, the workshop, landscaping shed, the alcohol tank, containment basin. There was a number of, again, Lot had done some good work to determine what the costs of those, the demolition and removal of those uses would be. And so in determination of the purchase price, as you can see down here, $3.19 million, we had actually negotiated and worked with Lot to say, okay, so what is the cost of those removal and the demolition of those buildings? And those were actually subtracted from the overall purchase price, and so that the city would have the the value, so to speak, in the contract to be able to demolition those buildings and remove them. In addition, there was as you can kind of see up here with the boiler house, and it says variable. Councilmember Althauser.
Yeah, my question about this mitigation, like these mitigation funds are for demoing these buildings and structures that exist. I guess my question is, what happens if there's mitigation that is not sort of presenting itself above ground, contamination that is not presenting itself above ground? Like if we find that the soils are severely contaminated, do we have an affirmative obligation to remedy that? And
yes,
are we also prepared to do that as well if we do?
Under this agreement, we have through the term of the agreement, which runs into 2030. So this is an installment agreement where we would pay a lot over time. But as we're paying a lot over time and working on these projects, the $300,000 environmental mitigation fund is to address basically that subsurface contamination that we may come across. Phase one's, the result of the new one that we did, the refreshed one, plus the work that Lot had done previously, does not give us any strong indication that there's any significant underground contamination that we might see, or subsurface contamination that we might see. Regardless, Lot is providing this $300,000 mitigation fund to help reduce the risks to the city should that be found. Plus the $225 building mitigation fund. The boiler house, as I was beginning to talk about there, really had one of the most variable demolition costs for removal of that facility, just because of some of the unknowns with the asbestos and some of the pieces in there. And so, they also provide an additional fund there. So should costs be in excess of what we considered in terms of the value for this contract, we would also have an additional kind of fund for us to be able to work with Lot to reduce that risk to us as well.
Okay, and so 300,000 for the environmental mitigation fund, we feel, because there's not indication of serious contamination, we feel that 300,000 is sufficient to hedge our risk on that.
Correct.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, and then one of the last elements that we provided for in the contract is an easement, so that Lot can continue to provide its mission to our customers in Tumwater, basically where they would have to run a main line, or where they have existing mains, transmission mains for sending wastewater to the plant or reclaimed water back up into the city. So those would be basically for Lot to continue to fulfill its mission to our city and to our customers. We said we would provide you an easement across that land at no cost to them. However, any additional, administration, engineering, designing, all that kind of stuff, those would still be Lot's responsibility to provide for that. We would just provide the cost, or the easement at no cost to them. So the overall purchase price is $3.19 to $670,000. It's because of the multiple uses of this, it's kind of, we're looking at it as a general fund, 86% stormwater fund, 14% split there, and basically, really kind of boils down to a per square foot element, for the various funds. Lot is holding, as I mentioned, this is an installment contract. It'll be paid over 6 years from 2025 when we close through 2030. Each payment annually would be $572,193.11. And that is provided for at a 3% low 3% interest rate that Lot will manage for us on that. Any questions before I move on from here? Yes, Councilmember Jefferson.
Yes, Dan. So we're gonna be the owners of this land, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So in the future, is there plans to lease it? Is there plans to sell it to a third party?
No, not necessarily at this time. So basically what we're going to do when we looked at kind of what are the ongoing site needs once we acquire this, you know, kind of that third party look ahead is really what's the development potential down there. As I mentioned earlier, you know, it's the properties are significantly impacted by the floodplain. You know, if not annually, it's every few years. There's floodwaters down there, and we did some work early on in this process to understand, get a little bit better understanding of what mitigation for that flood plain looks like. You know, ironically, part of the work that we would undertake is in terms of restoring the riparian area or providing for a riparian area, you know, would actually help mitigate some of that flooding impact. And so that's with the removal of the Puget Sound Energy Substation and some of the constraining elements towards the north end of that one parcel, which actually could potentially help reduce the volume of flooding that occurs or maintains on that property during a flooding event. You know, and so that could be helping, but the overall mitigation for a private developer to come in just to be able to, you know, build and put some land, so, you know, you know, make use of that land could be somewhere between $2 to $8 million at a base level for them to do that work. So it's pretty substantive, you know, for development to come in. So we recognize that it's got limited commercial marketability.
All right, thank you, Dan.
I'm going to add to that, Councilmember Jefferson. We talked about at our work session, the planned action EIS process that is going to allow the city to evaluate the entire area around the different brewery properties in terms of, you know, what could be the uses identified for those different areas. So that will actually, the timing is really good right now to allow us to ensure that this property, which is integral to the entire region down there, is included in that analysis. So we will have an opportunity to, through that process, and including specifically in the early parts of that process, to identify what might be the actual alternatives, what might actually be the best arrangement of the city intended uses for the property, and include that in the overall analysis of the impacts of those proposed uses on the built-in natural environment, and then to understand what the mitigation measures would be to ensure that that development can move forward. I think it's also a positive thing from the city's perspective that we would control this property that has significant importance in terms of being able to negotiate with the railroad with regard to the easements across there. I think a private developer is likely to have less success. That's all speculation because it's difficult to deal with railroads, particularly around crossings and real estate. But I think we are in a good position, particularly as a component of this overall planned action EIS process that we're talking about embarking on very shortly. Gives us a leg up and really helps to move the entirety of the property forward, the entirety of the region forward by having the city have control of this pretty significant piece of property. Thank you for letting me add to that, Dan. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, City Minister. I was going to ask about that, the brownfield study and everything. How did that factor into what will be what the city's doing down there?
Yeah, this is a great opportunity. All of these things sort of are coming together and aligning to really make that planned action EIS process an important one to help bring some more certainty around at least around what the plan for the area is and for how to serve it with public infrastructure. Right now, that's the biggest barrier to development. Dan is correct. Right now, whether it's the warehouse building itself or these properties or, you know, the big buildings on the knoll, one of the biggest challenges right now is just the availability of public infrastructure. So the planned action EIS process, hopefully again, funded through the brownfield redevelopment money that's available for those types of activities, planning work, will help us identify all of those various components and begin to answer some of those difficult questions.
And in the meantime, the city is still, we're going to be responsible for the property there, the routine maintenance. There are costs associated with just the general care and maintenance of the site, vegetation maintenance and removal of debris. One of the things that, I know Lot is happy to be free from is the stormwater charges, because there's a lot of impervious surface on those properties. And so the city would be assuming those. And so, the sooner that we can do some restoration, down there to revert some of those, that impervious surface back to more natural vegetated state, those costs could be reduced as well. But that does come with a cost. We are looking at potential grant options to help support some of that work. In addition to site security, as I mentioned earlier, though, Lot had indicated that security in and of itself is managed and funded by Tumwater Development LLC, so it's by others, so to speak, the folks that are responsible for the site as a whole, the larger brewery facilities as well, former brewery facilities, and so these particular parcels are not necessarily a frequent target for vandalism, although that would be a concern for us. We want to make sure that we're doing what we need to do to secure the buildings and have appropriate responses. And then, as we've mentioned a bunch.
So, Dan, will we be responsible for the security, or from what you're saying, then it'll still be the security looks like it'll be managed still by the developer, the current landowner? Then is that?
I mean, we still would need to negotiate that, but that would be the goal. I wouldn't see any reason why that they wouldn't continue to be the ongoing provider for that.
We have. Councilmember Swarthout, we talked about this at our management team meeting this week. We've got a group of directors that are going to be meeting and talking about what is the interim, management plan for these properties once we actually take control. And site security is obviously one of those things that we'll need to cover for sure. And it makes a lot of sense to, similarly to what we're doing in terms of the landowner who owns the property around the historic brew tower. We're talking with him and explaining to him that he needs to be more proactive in his security measures. And of course, the connection really is to the purveyor that is supporting Mr. Patel in providing security at the main brewery building. So it really does make a lot of sense to sort of, build on what's already happening there and beefing it up, hopefully through participation by the city for our properties here around the warehouse building, as well as the property owner to the north across Custer.
Great, thanks, Lisa. So she just said, we're going to assemble a staff team. We're going to execute this contract in, August 19th. That is the goal. To bring this back for council after your recess. One of the first things you would consider as part of your return there, and it would be this contract. We'd execute that ideally on August 19th. We are, as Lisa mentioned, had a conversation with the management team to put together that team to develop what is the work plan. What do we need to do from here moving forward? What does the schedule look like for us? What time, what is that timeline? How, when do we want to have certain things in place by? When do we start work down there? What work do we want to start? Considering all of those pieces, who's responsible for what? Water resources, makes logical sense. We'd be responsible for the habitat restoration, but will we do site security? That's not necessarily our purview. So, sorting that out with, the property, the adjoining property owners within the various departments, as well as learning what those roles and defining what those roles and responsibilities would be, looking at potential funding options for the work, whether it's demolition or habitat restoration or whatever the case may be, evaluating those funding options. And, ideally, we'd have something in place sooner than this, but, I'm giving us some flexibility by saying, we'd have that plan kind of outlined and defined pretty wholly by December 2025. And part of this work also, as a council member or Administrator Parks mentioned, is aligning this with the planned action EIS work. And so Kelly and would be critical to this staff team that we would be working on to make sure that those pieces can align. And then, we have 5 years to execute the contract and to, make sure that we can access the funds that are available from Lot, the $525,000 mitigation funds that we can be available. We have until, I think it would be September 1st of 2030 to make sure that we have applied for and then apply for those funds and in coordination with Lot. And so they know that what we would be using those funds for, requesting those funds. And so we have some time to be able to access that as well. That's really kind of the next steps that we see. Obviously, we probably have some more to come as we, as we start to define what this work plan schedule, planned action EIS. There's going to be certainly more conversations with council, so you kind of know where we'd be going once we're there. And in addition, as you know, as I mentioned earlier, the city owns the adjoining properties to the east off of Cleveland for part of the Brewery Wellfield redevelopment work. We're looking at starting some of that work this year in terms of well exploration, where we would put the wells, what kind of production volume can we get from there, and then the treatment center would be located on this property, which is more than sufficient for well treatment plant and access for maintenance of our facilities there. And so there could be some additional alignment again for access to the east side parcels.
Dan, sorry to interrupt.
think
So
that
you're
might
with your little
last
pointer.
slide.
Oh,
Mhm.
sorry, Dan. So I'm confused on the different parcels here. So where you currently have your red marker, it looks like, no, go back. That part is over towards South Street. Do we own that piece? Is that a separate section? I'm not sure what's dividing it. Is that a whole parcel or that's not one that we're
The parcel
purchasing, or do
boundary-
we already own it?
We already own this one. So this parcel here and this parcel here,
That
the city
parcel are,
we already own these, and we acquired those with the through the process to acquire the brewery, the former brewery water rights.
perfect. Okay, and then the building, the north of it then, is that,
That's private property. I want to say it's
oh, it's private
used
property.
to be DFW. I'm not quite sure if it's still leased by then or who owns
Okay.
it, but that's private.
So to the left of that, then that's a portion, the parcel that we'll be receiving?
Yes, everything you see highlighted in
Okay.
red orange here, that would, these are the three parcels the city is.
Okay, I was confused, sorry. All right, thank you.
And that really brings me to the staff recommendation to place the real estate contract with Lot Clean Water Alliance for the purchase of the Deschutes Valley properties on the August 19, 2025 City Council agenda for consideration with the recommendation to approve and authorize the mayor to sign.
All right. I'll go ahead and have you get back. Let's see. This is exciting. I know you've been working on this for a while, so it's just funny how things finally come into play.
Yeah, and as
It'll be
Administrator
fun.
Parks mentioned, the work that the city's also doing with the planned action EIS and the brownfield
Mhm.
grant, it's really a good alignment, and it's good that this all kind of came together as it is. So it's good timing.
And then I just have one more question with the PSC at the north part. Is that deactivated or is that an active station? Where PSCs or the property up north part?
My understanding is it is inactive. It has been deactivated, but the facilities, the infrastructure is still there, and so
Still
it
there.
just
Okay, all right.
removed
Okay,
upon our
thank you.
request or lots request, depending on property owner.
Can we request a field trip sometime to walk around
Yes, sir.
the property someday? That would be interesting to wander around down there. Are we allowed down there? As a
I
team?
mean, we can coordinate with Lot in advance.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would say, yeah, anytime after September 1st, we'd be more than happy.
Or
to
after
meet.
September 1st and it's ours, then, okay. All right, I'd be curious to wander around down there. All right. All right, so we do have a recommended action before us to place the real estate contract with the Lot Clean Water Alliance for the purchase of the Deschutes Valley properties on the June 17th, 2025 City Council consideration calendar with a recommendation to approve and authorize the mayor to sign.
Just as amended for the August 19th, 2025 City Council agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, because you apologize. Then I need to amend. I'm sorry, I'm reading from the packet. So you want to be correct, I guess we should put the recommended action back up again.
Can you
Yeah.
not see it?
I can see it. I'll just read it just to make sure that
Okay.
we got the record correct.
Thank you,
So
Michael. I appreciate that.
I'll move that we place the real estate contract with the Lot Clean Water Alliance for the purchase of the Deschutes Valley properties on the August 19th, 2025 City Council agenda for consideration with a recommendation to approve and authorize the mayor to sign.
And
Thank you, Michael.
I second that motion.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 All right, thank you.
Fantastic.
Very
Thanks.
exciting. Thank you, Dan, for bringing this forward. All right, so we have come to the end of our agenda here. Do we have anything else for the good of the order? No, it's going to be a hot weekend. stay hydrated. So everyone have a super good day. And with that, I will call the June 5th City of Tumwater Public Works meeting adjourned.